So I'll share my screen. Yeah, so welcome everyone to what's already the last maintainer and contributor call of this year. So we're gonna take a little break because the next one was planned on Christmas, and we didn't think it would be a good idea to sort of meet over Christmas. So just for the records, the antitrust policy notice on the Hyperledger Foundation, and also please make sure you adhere to the Hyperledger Code of Conduct. We have a few items that we wanted to talk about. I think mediation and the ADRs being the meat of the conversation. Feel free to raise any questions if you have them. Oh, we're missing the introduction slide. So normally we have whenever we have new faces, we ask them to do a quick introduction. So if you're new to this call, don't be a stranger. Feel free to introduce yourself, where you're coming from, and what you're hoping to get out of this call.
Now?
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sure. I can introduce. So I attended. You guys did an event, I think last week or the week before, that was announced on the Discord. So it's the first time. Like, I saw a little bit about it, but it's the first time I was actually being introduced to what it was. So it piqued my curiosity. So me myself, I work. I'm a DevOps at the Digital Identity Laboratory of Canada. I've been working there for 3 years, which is also the only 3 years experience I have in the space of digital identity. Before that, I was more into cybersecurity, pen testing, and these sort of activities. Most of the experience I have with being in Canada is with Hyperledger Aries, BC being very pioneering the adoption on the government level here in Canada. Although I also participate in some calls for the W3C with the VC API and so on. Not too familiar with the OpenID Connect, OpenID side of things. I have extensive experience with the Aries agent test harness, which is why I wanted to come here. I don't know if I know I asked a question in the meeting, and I was just curious a bit what sort of exploration you've made. And just for a disclaimer, at ID Lab, like, we don't have solution. We really just follow frameworks and we test solution, and we have more of a bit of a guidance role. But one project that we are working on, and it's my main task there, is a sort of a test bench that people, developers or so on, can come in. It's like a web interface, and they can test their solution against a plethora of frameworks. And I try to take many open source test suites and sort of provide easy to use experience with the web interface. And I've done some interesting work with the Aries agent test harness, which I'd be happy to showcase one day if you're interested. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So happy to be here and discuss. And yeah.
Awesome. Well, very, very welcome. You joined the right meeting today, because we're going to talk a little bit about mediator interoperability.
Awesome.
And Anton and Silas have worked on their own test suite, so it would be good to sort of exchange some thoughts there. I'm gonna call out some names. John, I think we all know each other. We're all among friends, and we saw the great presentation last time. So I'm gonna call out Eddie first, and then Sean as he joins the call.
Sure. So Eddie Satterley, I've been in the Hyperledger space for a very long time, since before there was a Hyperledger. So been dealing with the DLT side of things for a very long time, and built a couple of different identity-based solutions, both around Fabric and around Indy and Aries, and just really interested in looking at this approach and seeing how it may play. Building another new company. Left after my company got acquired, I was at OneUp for a year and then left December 1st, and I'm building another new company. So looking at architectures for that.
All right, cool. Welcome. Sean, David, would you give a quick introduction of yourself?
Yeah, hopefully my audio is working here. I'm just here to catch up with the Hyperledger environment and see what's going on. It's kind of a spectator.
Cool. Welcome. David?
Yeah, hey guys, I'm David. I'm from Uganda, and been looking at Hyperledger for a while, and I want to kind of build some stuff with it, and so I'm basically here to also look around and see what powerful features and tools I can use to build what I want to build.
All right. Well, welcome. I hope you will find the time here worth it. Like I said, whenever there's a question, please either raise it in the chat or feel free to just call it out. So with that out of the way, let's begin. I'll hand the floor to Fayad.
Thanks, Bart. First things first, I'd like to say welcome to all our new community members. I'm sure everyone else on the call is super excited that we have new faces on our call today. So last week, you guys may or may not have been part of the call where we officially announced the Open Enterprise Agent to the community. We had, I think, 214 registered participants and only 80 people attended. So if you guys did not see that, I'm pasting a link in the chat. You can go ahead and watch the YouTube video with that link. Bart mentioned this earlier as well. Today is our last maintainer and contributor call of 2023. We'll probably start again on the 9th of Jan. And yeah, the Cardano Identity Wallet just launched, which was quite interesting. So Bart has arranged a demo. When that will be, we're not quite sure, but we'd love to get them in, come give us a demo and showcase what they built. From what I've read, it supports multiple identity and credential standards. It securely manages digital assets. Apparently, it also integrates really great with dApps on Cardano. It's lower entry barrier for new users. There's interoperability, and it integrates key event receipt infrastructure, which is key for enhanced interoperability. So my first question to you guys probably would be is, what sort of engagement do you want us to have with this particular identity wallet? And then I do have another question. Next year, we do plan on doing a little bit of community and ecosystem education around identity, whether it take the form of a blog, a newsletter, maybe some vlogs. Bart has graciously offered to do some videos for us there and be the host of the show. I'm going to paste the link in the chat. So if you guys do have ideas about it, feel free just to fill out the form in the chat and let us know your thoughts. Yeah, that's it from me. Over to the more exciting stuff and what people game for. Over to you, Charlie.
Cool. Yeah, and before we do so, just so everybody knows, so I've been in touch with the Cardano Foundation for a while on the wallet side, and I've asked them now that they've sort of officially launched this to the world, if they could sort of come and share that also in this call for all to see, because we've been getting quite a few questions. And I feel it's probably easy to sort of confuse different things because they all originate from Cardano. I think there's a very complementary thing we could be doing, but hopefully a demo early in the year will help clarify and shed light, and sort of we can have a good conversation about that. So with that, I'll hand over the mic to Shailesh, who is one of the very capable creators of the mediator side of things, and he'll tell a little bit about the mediator that is already open source, but it will come to the Open Enterprise Agent repositories on the Hyperledger in Q1, and it has a test suite. So the floor is yours, Shailesh.
Hello. Hi. Okay. Can you hear me, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so yeah, recently what we did was we are supporting in the mediator now two protocols. First was HTTP, but now we also support WebSockets. So you could take advantage of that, specifically mostly with the pickup protocol. So now, for example, if you have a web wallet or a mobile wallet, and if you're using a mediator, you don't have to poll every time to know like if you have a message or not, because if you are using live delivery mode, you could straight away get message when someone sends you a message to a mediator. So, and it's in alpha stage at this moment. We will be releasing it soon in a beta environment. So I could give a quick demo, and I think let me share my screen then.
Yep.
You cannot start screen share while other participant is sharing. Okay. Yes. Hope you can see my screen.
Yep.
Yeah, so okay, so this is the mediator we are using. It's in our set environment, and this is its identity. It's a long identity. You can use like you can scan the code and you can interact with that. But for the demo purpose, I'm going to show like how Web Wallet is going to use the WebSocket protocol to do this. So I will go through the most of the protocol, how you can use like mediation, request, and everything. So this is like just a formal like browser WebSocket client I'm using just for test purpose. So assuming that you were not using HTTP and using WebSocket protocol, then you could just use this. And now I'm connected to the server, and now I could send messages across. For example, if I want to send a trust ping, which one of the protocols, so I could send a trust ping message to the mediator, and I could receive back in the same thing. So I'm going to just, for demo purpose, I will do one demo. So I just have created one message, and I'm going to send over WebSocket this, and I should get back message. So I'm receiving this. So this is the reply which I got back, and it is coming over the WebSocket and not HTTP. I mean, like this is not much exciting here, but when we go further down, when you use like pickup protocol and those things where it matters more because you don't have to do a polling. But just for demo purpose, I thought that I will do everything on WebSockets only. So this is just trust ping I sent, and it was fine. So I'm going to do a mediation request now to the mediator. Again, over a WebSocket, I'm going to continue to do that. Yeah, so if I decrypt this message, basically it will be saying that mediation was granted. But I can show that, but maybe I need to share another screen. So I can show later on, like, but this message that it was mediation granted. So so next, after mediation grant, this next stage is to send a key list update, because where the message, if say anyone sends you a message where you want to receive it on. So you have to do a key list update. And for the demo purpose, I'm going to use the same did which we are using, I used to send the request. Mhm. Sorry, just preparing the message. Mhm. Okay, I don't know what happened here. I didn't get that message. Mm. Let me see what is going on. Sorry, I don't know what happened. It was working.
I think you attempted the demo gods.
Yeah, just let me see if my message was not correct. Mm. Yeah, okay. So I think the message I was doing some, so I did mistakes, so it didn't work. But now it has worked. So we got the key list updated, and now this client is able to accept messages. So now, for example, if he wants like a live delivery mode, he has to send a message in live for a live delivery mode. And that once that message is received, after that, I will demo how the pickup is going to work. So yeah, so now delivery is also ready. So this it is expecting delivery message. So I'm going to just clear these messages just for demo purpose, and then I will show, for example, if some other maybe Alice was supposed to send a message to this guy, how the message should reach. So I'm going to just create a basic message basically and send. So I'm going to set it in the background, so you will see that it will be received in the message once I do that. So I'm doing that now. So hopefully you should get a message there. Yeah. So this is, you can see it was instantly delivered message on the WebSocket. I can send like one more message just for demo purpose once again. So I'm sending a second message and you can receive. So that's how you can use WebSocket in a delivery mode. And you could constantly, I mean, like as long as you are connected to the server, which is Mediator in this case, you would receive instant messages and you don't have to do polling to see whether you have message or not. So I think, yeah, that was the demo purpose, how the live mode works. And if you have any questions on this, I can try to answer whatever possible.
Maybe one clarifying question or comment. So we have an alpha environment for this, which should be publicly available if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So what's the best way to provide feedback on this from the people in the call?
I mean, like there are two ways. One thing is they can explore this mediator and then try to see if to use any wallet and send a message and see whether they can use the WebSocket, and that's one way. Other ways would be like if anyone wants to run their own mediator, they can use a repository, and there are all the instructions on the repository where you can how you can spin up the mediator, and then you could run your own mediator and test as well. That way is another way. So at this moment, but once we have like the beta environment where all our testing phase is complete, then probably that environment also will be available. But this is also available, but because it is like in alpha, sometimes you might doing a deployment or anything, it might go down. But I believe that because it's again December, we might not do much anything here. So this environment should be still available to test.
All right, cool.
Okay, thank you.
So
I can stop sharing.
yep. Cool. So yeah, and otherwise feel free to reach out on Discord as well to sort of leave questions and comments on this. I've also shared in the chat the link to the interoperability test suite. Maybe one question about that, Shailesh, the WebSocket part of this is not part of that, right?
No, not yet.
Okay, but it will be.
Yeah, I think the interoperability will be on protocols. So I don't think the HTTP or WS should matter in that case. But yeah, I mean, if when we complete the test suite, yeah, we should able to do that.
Okay, awesome. Okay, cool. Well, then we move on to the next part. David Poltorek.
Oh, thank you, Bart. This slide has actually been updated only just in the very few moments before the call started, but we added a link to it as well. So there's a link now in Architecture Decision Records on the title, but I go through the content as is. So this is I raised in our Discord around having a process for managing our Architecture Decision Records. I then couldn't come to the meeting, but I had feedback that it was discussed and we could move forward with it. So this section is adding a regular section in. At the moment, very light touch. I would like to make it a little bit more formal and have a table of contents and links for reviews. But at the moment, this is a slide just showing what open architectural decision records that we have and some comments around their current statuses and some suggested actions. So my expectation is that regularly there will be open ADRs in GitHub on pull requests. The team will be working on them as part of feature delivery. And we will be able every 2 weeks to see a list of them and say, hey, these are really interesting, or these haven't been decided yet. Let's take these and let's discuss them in a high fidelity conversation. That's what we're going to be going towards. And I'll try and publish more on that and make that more formal. For today, I've just looked through the ADRs that are part of our Cloud Agent repository. There are currently no open to be discussed, but there are 6 draft. And those 6 draft look like they've already been implemented. So there isn't really discussion points. They look like they've already been implemented. And for me, this shows that we're not, there's a quality issue of what we have in terms of our processes, which I think we know. I think we're already working on this. So right now, there's definitely one that I reviewed that I've written that needs to be superseded. I'm fairly certain there's quite a few missing because we're actively making decisions, and I just don't think we're documenting them as we go through. And that the stats are showing that based on when you see feature releases happening and you see the ADRs being raised. But we have some great examples of ADRs. So there are some really good ones that are there. I think this is more of a how often we're doing it, not what we're putting into them. So in order for this section to be useful, I think we need to do a bit of work in terms of the process. So my suggested actions really are to go and find what active development is happening and what ADRs they should have, and just make sure that we have those in progress, that we're writing those just for those current features, and get those done and get them into the process. I did notice that we actually have a site as part of the documentation site that's still part of Atala that actually has all the ADRs. And is still branded and still speaks about it in the wrong way. So I'm going to go and look at rebranding and updating that, because that's quite an easy thing to do. I'd like that to be in a nice place to start this process with. And I'm going to look across the whole state to see what's correct. I think it'd be great to have a few maintainers as volunteers to help look across, the implementations that we've got and finding ADRs that are incorrect, that we should have updated, or that we're missing. And then actually there's already some work going on around what is the process for keeping them up to date, aligned to future delivery. So I'm looking forward to talking about that very early in the new year for that. That's the current state of play. Are there any comments on that? I think for me personally, there needs to be a little bit more work done for prep to make it useful. If any ADRs are opened, I will put them in Discord to say, hey, these have been opened up, go and have a little look, please comment. And then we'll upgrade the review process as we progress through the start of next year.
I'd be super interested in hearing from potential implementers, the sort of like what they're looking for in terms of ADRs. Like, what's the kind of information you would like to see that's helpful for any implementation. So maybe that's something we can also sort of ask around on Discord or in these calls, to sort of make sure we don't just build documentation for documentation's sake.
I really like that. Hopefully Faye can hook me up with some kind of polling system in Discord. We can put together a little bit of feedback request. But I'll do a little bit to make sure that they're there, that there's some there that people can see and already look at and say, hey, yes, this is a good level, or we want more. And then I'll do that poll. And I like that set of actions, Bart. Thank you for suggesting it.
Cool. All right, let's move on.
So this is another section for me. I am basically playing back a conversation that we had, which was a really good conversation 4 or 6 weeks ago now on security. So I've got a couple of slides on what we discussed and then some next steps. So we actually came out of this discussion with quite a few security principles. So to set context for those that weren't there, we were talking around, what are the principles for us to secure our code, secure our application? I had a really interesting conversation that came out with 2 key principles that I picked at the top level. The first is that our approach should be that we want to make it hard to build insecure solutions that create harm for the people using it or subjected to them. And a number of sort of actions and controls and procedures when it can go into this, such as having a secure software development lifecycle, or finding the parts we want to include from that, and making sure that the ecosystem is secure by feeding back on protocols and the services that we use if we do find vulnerabilities, and making sure that our systems for building are protected from abuse. So if you were part of that call, you can see where I'm kind of slotting these into some top level items. So that first one, it should be hard to build insecure solutions. And the second one is that we ensure we can accept contributions of a low barrier to entry. And this is about, yes, we want it to be secure, but it can't be so hard to make it secure that no one contributes. We have to make sure there's low friction. We have to make sure there's help available and guides and use automation. So these are the 2 principles I thought were the best 2, the biggest 2, and I could fit everything into. If you could go to the next slide. These were the sort of controls that we talked through. And this could be sort of a midterm roadmap. And my next steps have some steps on these. Patrick, you've got your hand up. Please jump in.
Yeah, I just want to add, if you want to go back to the previous slide, I think it's not only about building solution, but also there's a risk to like bad implementation. There's some specific things with framework that you need to put in place to do it correctly. And if you have someone, let's say a verifier that wants to join an ecosystem and they didn't have the whole knowledge and they want to implement something, and there's maybe something that are not so clear how to implement, and they do a bad implementation of it that could lead to a next point, I think this is also something that's worth mentioning. I see it differently than building an insecure solution. Sometimes they just want to take an already built solution and deploy it and implement it. And you want to make it so that to minimize the impact of having a bad implementation, leaking information, or, you know, especially for verification, you know, sometimes when you verify a credential, you know, you want to make sure it's not revoked, and details like this that need to be properly put in place. I know in Akapai, like a lot of the business logic is sort of delegated to the controller aspect of it. So even though if your agent will do what it needs to be done, the sort of the business decision will come from the controller. And this is where I would see a risk for a bad implementation, you know, like thinking a credential is valid when actually might be revoked, or maybe it didn't quite verify. So it's a detail I would mention.
I think it's a really good contribution. Thank you for putting your hand up and saying it. And just to play that back to you, that, yeah, we make a point about making sure the ecosystem is secure, but the key point there is that other implementations, vendors or agents may not be secure themselves, or may do things by accident or for nefarious reasons. And we should make sure that actually when they're running at runtime, we also protect our users from the possibility of being exploited from those issues. And I think that is something that we have slightly missed, and I really like that. So I've made a comment on that. I'll see what I can do to work that in. But I think everyone on the call would probably agree that that's, you know, that there certainly are some controls you want to put in place for that.
I wanted to push back a little bit on that, which I think, because I think the point is very valid. At the same time, if I look at, for example, the secure storage that we're sort of implementing across the SDKs, we've actually taken a deliberate decision to sort of put that outside of our control, because the moment you do an implementation which is sort of secure, you also take on a certain liability of it. So I think I see it as sort of a spectrum, and I definitely think the point is valid, and it's definitely something that I feel we need to explore further. But I also think it's a gray area. So I'm thinking about sort of, hey, there could be like secure reference implementations or reference architectures that we could sort of provide, but we would provide them sort of as is, with no sort of statement of liability or things like that, because I think it's always a very, very tricky beast.
So again, another great point. And I think there's a balance, right? I like the point, because I think there's parts of it where you can go and back to graceful degradation. Hey, no, look, we can't do this action because A, B, and C, right? So some light touches just to protect the users in the agent, for example. But I do completely think it needs more thinking through to be the right balance. So I'll look at writing something that's like a third principle, and let's have a discussion around it to see if it's something we want to add or tweak an existing and get it right and see what kind of things. I think for me personally, I need to look at the concrete things that we could do to really refine it for myself in my own mind. So Patrick, maybe if we can get an introduction, you can tell me about some of your experiences to get my brain thinking about it. I'd greatly appreciate it. I'll reach out to you. So I think some of these, and maybe we can skip some of the detail to go on to the next steps, but these are all the controls we kind of mentioned. We touch upon having a security policy, protecting our automation pipelines, looking at our application security, not in just how we code it, but the features that we choose to build into it, such as integration to secret storage like Keycloak and Vault. And I think a lot of these features we can expect to be driven by the value they deliver, by the community, and by the business value. And the last part of ecosystem security, I think that's where I can add a little bit from the previous comment. So this is, you can consider this a medium-term roadmap. What I want to get to quickly is the next slide, which are kind of the next steps. So first step, we need to make sure we have a security policy in our repository. I started to draft one. What I want is a decision here. This is a decision required, which is, do we go over manual process? Hey, I found a vulnerability, I consider an exploit. Do they email someone? Do they Discord someone? Do we have a manual process for it? Or can we go and enable the GitHub private security advisory system, which gives a contributor a button in GitHub that says, I want to report a private vulnerability, which goes and notifies the maintainers and then gives them a life cycle to manage that. And when it's been managed to the point where it can be disclosed, it can be communicated when it's already been fixed, it can be switched into a public security notification. And I'd like us to think about that and decide on that so we can just quickly move forward with that. I'll come back to that at the end of the slide. Once we've done that, we have to decide how we're going to notify people, when we're going to do it, if we're going to remediate it before that happens, and make sure that we have those channels written down so people know when they can receive updates from it. And I also would like to, in this file, include our security principles at the bottom, because unfortunately it's the least important information in this file, but just so people can think about how we're designing, how we're building. And that principles part of the document could be built out over time to add more contribution information or ways to think about it and threat and risk assessments. So that's kind of my urgent step one. I think this is the not the first time, but like the first formal decision that I've called out. But how would you like to go about making this decision?
So I'd like to understand maybe I'm assuming you've looked into this. I'm sure. Like, is there a preference that you have, and if so, why would you have that preference? Because this feels like something which is a typical easy to revert decision. So let's not spend too much time on it. If it's good enough and easily maintainable, I think we should just move forward.
Yeah, very pleased with that. My preference is enabling in GitHub private security. I read the documentation. I can't enable it without turning it off. So it just becomes a link. It's preferred because there's no need to message communication, email addresses, inboxes, Discord channels and such. It's in a private, secure place. Yes, it's easily reversible. We can easily change it back. So if you're happy, I will go enable that, do a little test with the maintainers, let you know that we're testing it, see how it comes through, and then put the document in place to say how it works and go from there.
Okay, so then my proposal would be to sort of do that unless anybody in this call objects to that. Hearing no objections, so I guess we're good to go on this. So there, first decision.
I've got a couple more slides. I'll get through them nice and quickly. So if I could have the next slide. So step two, a very important topic from last time, which is we need to secure our automation pipelines. So at the moment, when a new PR is opened, everything can run. It's not causing us any issues at the moment, but you can see very quickly that if we've got lots of contributions, there can be issues in terms of the build process taking too long, or potentially people taking advantage of that build process. So I think step two, and I've tried not to put too much detail in it because I think the part of the team and Anton specifically who work on this will be opinionated and know the best way to do it. But we should look at limiting what happens by default when you just open a PR if you're not a maintainer, and then how we can trigger that pipeline to be a full pipeline, either by a review, a comment, an approval, whatever it needs to be. But I think these two steps for me are two things we can do very quickly that put us in a very good position. They just close out, and that's nice and hopefully nice and simple to do. I don't know if anyone's on the call and has any comments for that, or he's just generally happy.
Yeah, I'm here. So some things to be discussed here, but more internally, I guess, in technical details. Because in general, right now, pipelines are secure because we don't use like any internal secrets to run them. But yeah, probably on the later stages we introduce something so we can like set additional steps to be executed. But there are quite some issues with running pipelines for forks and how it differs between running pipelines internally. So yeah, I mean, not a topic for this meeting, but anyway, that's a good idea.
So this is mostly here because of your great suggestion from our last maintainers call. If it's possible, I'll come offline and work with you a little bit on where you see the right time being for this and what you see being the right approach. And maybe you and I can come back in a couple of weeks or in our next meeting, say, hey, this is how we're thinking about it. And we can do it at the appropriate time.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point of time, I could just say that there are no major or even minor, I guess, security vulnerabilities in our pipelines. So that we're kind of fine with that because we fixed all of them.
So last slide, and then I can skip the last one, but I really want to make the point that yes, we can put tooling and controls in, but we actively need to be thinking and getting our contributors to think about security. And this doesn't need to be a very big effort right now. It can be as a simple checklist in a PR release note that says, if, does it have security implications? How do I decide yes or no? And if it does, speak to a maintainer. And so it's promoting this thinking that will move us towards people going, hey, I am introducing something that could be a security issue or a change that could be a security issue. And I think it's actually something we can do relatively quickly to put notes together and a little checklist, and then take that on board into the maintainers as and when it happens, so we can work out the best process to deal with it, rather than putting in a long process. I'm happy to propose something on that front as well. And Anton's probably you and I to, again, or anyone who wants to contribute on that in terms of the release note and PR process.
I think,
Yep.
Patrick, you go first. You raised
Well,
your hand.
So Hyperledger, the Linux Foundation, they have a sort of a bug bounty security disclosure mechanism. How does this differ from that? I think I'm talking more like earlier there was a slide about disclosing a vulnerability. So how do you see that existing like in comparison? Because I know this is like a Linux Foundation project. So do you feel like this would need its own sort of mechanism to do this?
It's a really good point. I don't know is the answer. So I wasn't aware that a bug bounty program would be available for a lab. It's something I'll need to go and look into and ask the right questions for. But if there's already a process established with good guidance, I don't see a need to create our own one. This really the approach for this was doing something simple and small after raising it, so we could make a progression. So
there should definitely be something at least to say like, here, go there, or like there should be a mention, because I think you need to make it very easy. If someone finds something, they shouldn't have to find how to disclose it. Like it should be a few arrows pointing there. So
yeah,
I'll find the link. I'll find the link. I'll put it in the chat here.
Cool. Thank you very much. So then let me review those and I'll play it back in Discord just to make sure we are doing the right thing. But yeah, it wasn't intended to replace. If there's already something there that we can reuse, we should be doing that, in my view. So we'll look at that.
On this one, especially if I was reading the second one, and I was like, isn't there always a security implementation if you're working on like a digital identity system? How could we provide clarity like on that? That might be something we want to think about, saying, hey, what are, I mean, again, I think there's the spectrum, like, oh, I'm introducing a new cryptographic primitive somewhere. We're like, okay, yeah, that's a clear one. Versus, oh, I'm sort of, I don't know, we're now supporting a slightly different protocol, or we're supporting an on-creds, and sort of there might be a security sort of issue in the on-creds library somewhere hidden. How would we sort of make that assessment? I think that's a very tricky one. So my recommendation would almost be to sort of just look at the hygiene rather than the assessment on whether or not there's a security implication.
So this slide is before Get Automation to check stuff and give feedback, just because how difficult it is to do the integration and get a tool onboarded. And my thinking behind it was some really simple ones like, hey, I've made a new endpoint. It's got to be public all the time. Some really obvious things that I think we've experienced in the past that have let us go, oh yeah, that's quite interesting. We should make that common guidance and a golden path. Like if you do X, then we should have someone check it and approve it. I think I take the point. It might be very difficult for us to give clarity in kind of the checklist guidance, whatever that looks like. And if so, it might be more difficult than having it than not having it. But I think the point here is that we should be, what I'm trying to make is we should be getting contributors to think about it, and we've got to work out how we do that. And so if I take that offline and find some concrete examples and then play them back, and let's just see where they fall and see if it's actually going to be useful or not, a hindrance or valuable.
Yeah. Okay.
So thank you, Patrick, for posting it. I'll check that afterwards. Very last slide. At the moment, if we look at the security tooling that's available, there is a license scan that takes place every 6 months. There is some Hyperledger provided tooling, but we are not prevented from adding additional. So my suggestion is that we do a sort of quick assessment with a number of maintainers in the call to look at SNCC, which can provide a completely free service for SAST for iOS top 10, software composition analysis, license compliance, container scanning, and IOC, as well as give you IDE plugins for all your users, which works really well for open source software. And then report back after a certain time and say, hey, yes, it was useful. It gave us this ability to see this at the point when we're writing code. We could put this kind of roadblock in from a PR and a gating perspective to prevent that checklist being needed and to promote that thinking about security. But we do need to attach it. We do need to check its results. We do need to do some work on integrating with it. And the first step would be to just make sure our community architects and Hyperledger are also happy for us to do that, which I believe they are from my initial discussion, and then go through and test that out. And this will be one of the tools that could help us, but it's not changing the way that we think necessarily. And that's why this is after getting the contributors to think about security, but it's a helpful tool.
Okay. You just triggered me into sort of thinking maybe we should introduce threat modeling as lightweight threat modeling, because also sort of aside from these 4 steps, as most of you will know, but some of you may not, is for every major release, the intention is to have an external security audit. So we have our most recent like version 2. When we switched to version 2, it was audited by Kudelski, and we'll be sort of publishing those results somewhere in the repos. We just need to find a good place for that. Maybe that's also something to think about, to sort of make sure that those kinds of artifacts are easily discoverable. Because I know they taught us a whole lot, that entire process. So that might also be a good sort of double as an education as well as sort of an informational purpose.
It's a good point. There's an item on that in one of the previous slides that says, hey, don't worry about it. It's just because we want to get these. There's a note about, well, if it's an organizationally sponsored, how do we manage it? How do we release it? How do we get access to it? How do we help with remediation, which we can discuss at a different time. But yeah, I completely agree. It's a nice way to show and make it available and put it forefront. So wherever people are developing, they can see the type of testing that happens, and that will help them with their mindset as well. So I think that's a really nice idea. On your threat modeling, this future part is exactly what I meant here, which is we should iterate on the best practices from a secure SDLC and bring them forward and bring them in. And threat and risk assessment would be my number 1, which is when we're doing features, we look and say, hey, this is possible if we do this work, and here's how we can mitigate it. And we have experience of that all from previous work, and we can bring it in and we can make it effective as long as it's a light touch. And again, it meets our first principle, which it doesn't prevent, it's easy to enter and doesn't provide friction to it. So those first 4 steps are things I think could take days to do. We could do those now. And then that requires a little bit more thinking, not much more thinking, but we're changing processes, potentially implementing friction. So I just wanted to take some more time to think through it.
Okay.
That is the end of the content. I will make sure I have slightly less slides next time. I appreciate your patience today.
I think it was good because I think it's a very important topic that we should sort of tackle relatively early on and set up correctly, because it's just super helpful down the line, and it's not a bolt-on.
I think also, like, if I can just add something, like capturing the vulnerabilities of a project through its life cycle is very interesting, not only to know what's secure, but let's say after a year to sort of see the evolution, what CVEs came and go in the supply chain. Like something I did at the lab, I set up this, I posted a link, I set up this dependency track, and I tracked a few open source repositories, and you set it up, it kind of runs automatically in CI, and then after a year you have this chart of different version, the amount of vulnerabilities that came and go. You can compare different frameworks, which obviously in JavaScript is going to be very, very different than Python, for the thing. And it's an interesting insight to have, to see if the project is going in the right direction. If you see that you're collecting more and more vulnerabilities, maybe you need to rethink a little bit how you do it. But if you see the number is lowering, and I think it's just interesting insights to have to publish a report, yearly reports or so on. So
Thank you for the link, Patrick. I think I looked at Dependency Track maybe 5-6 years ago. It seems to have come quite a way. I'm really interested in reviewing it. One of the reasons for just putting SNCC there was because it has some of the capabilities. It's quite a holistic platform. But I'd like to spend some time looking at this as well. It looks really good.
I've worked with both. I'd say like SNCC is a lot more modern, user friendly. They have their services they offer. As Dependency Track is more OWASP is a very has a good reputation, so it's got that, and you can choose like which database you want to scan for your vulnerabilities. You can actually integrate with SNCC, and they have all sort of integration. So I think one or the other. There's no.
Thank you.
I feel pretty confident with both.
Cool. Any other questions or comments as we almost reached the top of the hour?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the Aries test harness. Maybe have a just quick discussion for this. What sort of exploration you've made, and how do you see that? Like, do you see the project actively maintaining a back channel to participate in the interrupt reports, and what are your thoughts with this?
Yeah, so there's a couple of points to it. So initially, we looked at the Aries test harness to say, hey, we want to test interoperability against that. One of the issues that we ran into was the lack of support of DITCOM2, which basically rendered the whole test harness pretty useless from the get-go.
Yes.
So there has been some involvement in the version 3, which would support DITCOM2. I'm not sure what the latest state is. But it's definitely those kinds of approaches that we kind of like, because we're also
I think it's not the test harness the problem here, but I think it's the implementations themselves. Yes, there's the RFC, yes, there's the protocol, the spec, but very few implementations. I think AFGO, I think, had it, if I remember correctly. I'm not too sure. But I know ICAPA, is not quite there yet. So yeah, it's a bit weird when you want to test interoperability, but you have nothing to test against. You can, I guess, test against yourself. Like, you could have your platform play both role and just prove, like, yes, I can do DITCOM v2. I think that's a good place to start. But go on with the.
Yeah, no. So I think. I think you definitely touch on something which is quite interesting, also in terms of asking yourself the question, sort of, what are we interoperable with? We've tried to sort of make sure that the things that we do are loosely coupled, but even then, we've noticed that we sort of fell into like the client server trap. So we have SDKs that sort of neatly work with the agent, which neatly works with the mediator. And so we're actively in the process of decoupling those further and sort of trying to come to a contract first approach, where we're currently exploring how we can best support sort of things like backward compatibility. How do we look at discoverability of features, which I know is in the whole ecosystem is a conversation that is ongoing. It's mostly focused on wallets and not so much around sort of the other components. So it's a very active topic for us. I think we've dipped our toes in the water a little bit with the mediator sort of test suite that we have, and we've tested like the Roots ID mediator and I think the one from Block Trust on a limited set of protocols, but that's open source and it's relatively easy to expand upon. So one of the things that we're looking at also is, could we make this part of our overall testing strategy? So maybe not at the PR level, but maybe at the release level, that whenever we release a stable version of any of the components, that they have an interoperability test run to it. But we haven't really made a decision on what kind of test we want to be running. I think I would love to see a little bit more adoption of the Aries test harness. but I'm also sort of hesitant to introduce a new test harness because thing with standards, right?
I'd be happy like in the next year if you want. I can do like show a bit what I've made and my reflection around it, because you play with these tools a bit and the different I play with the W3C test suite, and they have the sort of interoperability test suites, but they work very differently, right? Like for what I see from the Aries, you're really testing the frameworks, right? You test framework interoperability. That doesn't mean that your platform will be interoperable with another platform. I talked with Animal and they were doing interoperability with Northern Block. And even though they were both using Aries frameworks that are supposed to be interoperable, yet their platform, they had interoperability issues. When you go at the W3C side, one group I follow a lot is the VC API, and they have test suites. So they have the spec, but what they test are implementations. So there's no back channel being maintained there. It's just the VC API itself is sort of the back channel. People make a test implementation available. They provide keys, like test keys to access their implementation, and that's how they drive like their matrix. So there's interesting distinction between testing implementation and testing frameworks. And one project I shared a bit and I'm working on is to use the work of the Aries agent test harness to test implementations, because the back channel spec is interesting. I think it could be made a bit more official, made it into a spec, and then have a sort of system that, let's say a company wants to use the open agent, well, they maintain this back channel that you provide, like plug this back channel to your implementation, and then running the test harness, I could test this against other implementation. And I think when you test real implementation, you get to test things like, sounds simple, but just like your firewall configurations. Sometimes there's problem with mediators, and especially if you talk about government agencies, sometimes it's very secured environment. And yeah, so that's just like one observation I've made, like implementation versus frameworks. Something to keep in mind.
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from. So in a former life, I've been involved in one of the plug fests from Homeland Security, and developing one of the early test suites, and it was a really interesting process to see how that came about. And I think it had pros and cons. I think at the time, because it focused so much on implementations, that was really helpful for development. But I think from a sort of depth perspective, it sort of lacked some things, and definitely one of the things that we're seeing now, and this was actually one of the drivers for the test suite for the mediators, was that just the spec implementation is varied.
Could you link that test suite?
And yeah, so
I'll have a look.
I'll see.
I'm gonna have to jump off. I have another call at 11.
Yeah. So we need to close. I'll share that. We can continue in on Discord if you want. But yeah, let's have that conversation. I'd be more than happy. I think all of us are more than happy to sort of learn how we could best approach that, and it's the right time. So thanks very much for the offer. Thanks everyone for taking the time to join this call. Given it's the last one, I wish you all very happy holidays and end of the year with family, friends, and loved ones. And we hope to see you again on January 12th, I think. Bayat, what was
it? On for 9th, it's gone for 12th.
Jan.
Okay, early Jan. We'll communicate on Discord when we see each other again. But until then, happy end of the day, happy end of the year, and we see you again in good health and spirit next year.
Take care, everyone.
Awesome. Bye.
Ciao. Bye.
Bye.